Okay. So
Perfect.
welcome to the field instructor orientation. We're going to cover information for bachelor's and master's students. Maybe. Why isn't it letting me advance? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're going to cover some information on roles and responsibilities. Talk about ways that you can orient students to your organization. We're going to cover just quickly the developmental stages of internship experience and look at ways that you can help students integrate theory and other course content into practice. That's a really huge part of our roles as field educators. We'll talk about some ways to respond to the challenging students and then review the paperwork. So the purpose of field is to really help students develop their identity as a social worker and then use a lot of their self-reflection. You know, our use of self is one of the most important parts of our tools that we have in our toolbox, and understanding our biases, et cetera, and how do we use ourselves to develop relationships in field. We'll talk about integrating course content and practice. That's another purpose, and developing skills to be competent. At MSU, field education is 20% of the graduate degree requirements, and it's close to that, I think, for the undergraduates as well. Undergraduate and the first placement MSW students, for students that are in our regular, we call it our regular program, which means they have 2 field placements. Those placements are generalists, meaning they have to work across all the systems and they have to work across all of the population settings, from individuals, groups, families, communities, and organizations. The second placement or the advanced standing placement is considered is concentration focused or the specialized. So those students are either clinical or they're in our macro organization and community leadership track. So we're going to talk about some roles and responsibilities now. For you as field instructors, for bachelor students, the requirements, and these are CSWE requirements that we follow, requires a bachelor's degree in social work or a BA with other social service practice experience. For master students, our field instructors have to be an MSW and have 2 years post-master's experience. And licensure is preferred, but it's not required. The licensure requirement, while some other universities do require that, is because of the Michigan Public Health Code that requires students to be Medicaid providers to have be supervised by an LMSW. And because of our liaison model, all of our MSW students are supervised or monitored by a licensed master social worker. So that, I'm just letting you know, that's how that works for us. So for field instructor responsibilities, both to the student and to the school, for the student, really important to provide an orientation to the agency and the paperwork. Students not going to know what kind of learning opportunities they're going to have. And so we ask that you help them develop activities that will help them, that are appropriate for their age and stage and experience, and then also that they can do because within your organization. Also to coordinate just in general educational activities, maybe with other staff there or some of your community partners. To provide an hour of weekly supervision. We also hope is a reflective form of supervision to help the students continue to look within themselves to see how they're doing, how they're feeling, what they're bringing to the relationship, to provide ongoing feedback and assist with challenges. Your responsibilities to the school would be participate in the training like you are today. Thank you. Complete a mid-semester verbal evaluation. So that's like the 3rd or 4th week of October and end of February, which you would sit down with the student. It's a verbal conversation about how you see that they're doing in field at that point and kind of what they need to do to improve. So it's a little bit more of a formal evaluation than just the regular weekly supervision. We have a liaison model, both for all of our students, and we would ask you to consult with them if there's any issues or concerns, like the student is not showing up, or there's some kind of a disruption, or there's some behavior that's of significant concern. And then we would ask that you report any changes, like if you're going to leave, or there's a significant change in the agency, or learning activities significantly change, or there's concerns about the performance. And then we have our documentation for you to sign, and all of those are in Sonia, which is our data system. We have this supervision agenda or note sheet that is an option that students can use to bring to supervision. At the top, you can see that there's the, like, it's just a tool, it's optional. It covers each one of the competencies, and then the student could write in what they did, have any other kinds of topics that they want to discuss, and then what competency or behavior that they're attending to in the learning agreement. You can modify this, not use it. I would probably just have the 9 competencies at the top and have a student write a paragraph about what they did and how it addressed that particular competency if I wanted that for supervision. But up to you. So some benefits for your service is we offer $5 of continuing education for this appointment year starting July 1 through June 30th. You don't need to do anything. Our CE department knows who our field instructors are. So when you register, you just click that you're a field instructor, faculty, or liaison, and you're in. You can go through a clinical appointment if you want and get these other benefits. If you have questions about that, please contact our office coordinator, Paris Carter McGee, and her information, all of our information is at the back of this presentation. But if you got an ID and you wanted to use it, you could use our IM facilities, whatever the things that we as faculty and staff have access to, you would have access to. So our responsibilities, the student and the schools, to you. So the students need to participate in learning and take an active role in learning. They're certainly supposed to follow the policies and adhere to the code of ethics, exhibit their professional behavior, let us know about any safety issue at all. And that can be both any kind of safety, physical, psychological, if they're just, they have some concerns. There's, and of course, with the pandemic, there's a lot of concerns around people's safety in that regard. And address concerns to you appropriately. And sometimes they need some coaching around that. And the liaison certainly is there to help support that. We assign the field liaisons to the students. Our bachelor students are in a seminar group with an instructor once a week. And that person, so they serve both as the liaison and an instructor for the field seminar. Our MSWs liaisons are people who are community practitioners and licensed. As I said, everybody's licensed, and I assign with help of this field team, we assign the field liaisons to MSW groups. We're also responsible to provide you support and any kind that you need solving problems. We monitor the progress of the internship and review the learning agreements and the LET forms. So we're here to support in addressing concerns. There's an agency visit that takes place usually in the fall semester. Those will remain virtual unless there's a request for it to be in person. And the school is responsible for assigning the final grade. You recommend a grade as the field instructor, and the ultimate responsibility is either to myself or Nikki Moody as the bachelor's field coordinator. So for our requirements, our students typically do 240 hours in the fall and in the spring. And MSW students are in that field integrative seminar for 8 to 10 hours. And that's for both semesters. And those hours count toward field. CSWE has allowed for a reduction in field hours. And so this year, all of our students will be in field a minimum of 200 hours. They have to show competence though in that time. So if students need, the standard course is for them to do 240. If they need to drop to 200 with your under approval, that's a possibility as long as they're able to demonstrate competence across all 9 competencies during that time. I'm just going to pause to see if there are any questions or comments so far.
There aren't any that were in the chat, Julie.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to orientation and safety. So getting them started with the history and mission goals and services that you all provide, your populations, and so getting to know your website or other kinds of reading materials. Students are going in at the very beginning, reading policy and procedure manuals. We will want for them to look through this material to see kind of in a critical way, not to be critical of you, but look at who you serve, who is not served, who's eligible for service. There's a real focus on anti-racist practice and non-discriminatory practice, inclusion, equity. So just in terms of us being social justice folks and having that be our core mission or one of our cornerstones for social work, we want students to look at material through that lens or through those lenses and be able to have a relationship with you so they could give you some feedback about that or just ask some questions. When Paris started with us, our new office person, it was really helpful because she'd say things like, well, why are you doing it like that? Or wait, this doesn't really make sense to me. And all of us on the team have been doing this for a while, certainly and so it's helpful to have someone give a review and kind of with some fresh eyes. Okay. So students have the right to remain safe at all times. We have a safety policy that says they don't have to do anything that feels unsafe to them. I mean, one time we had to replace a student because home visits were required. She was working with young teenage boys, and she could not, according to her background and part of her culture rather, she was not allowed to be alone with any male. So we just had to replace her because that was a safety issue for her. But students rarely get hurt, and they're to follow your guidelines, and we just let them know to know the policies, to trust their intuition and their social work gut, and not engage in something that they just don't feel safe doing yet. So we're going to talk a little bit about stages of the placement and what you might do as you're helping a student move through these. So developmental stage of the internship, there's high anticipation. These are novice people. If I was an intern in your organization, I would have a lot of anticipation as well, even though I've been practicing social work for a while. So the novice need, they want more structure. They do better at the beginning with structure and kind of getting to know, sort of like the how-tos and what's the script. So they're concerned about, can I really do this? The first time that they answer a crisis call or they attend a board meeting and present, these kinds of things. Oh, I also want to say, when I use the term client in here, it means I'm referring to client system. So it's from the individual to the community. So please bear that in mind. Juggling their life with their field placement. This is going to be a huge challenge for a lot of our students with all of the additional things that they're basically taking on a part-time job by adding this field placement, unless they're doing it at their place of employment. So we have an orientation checklist that you're welcome to review if that's helpful. Just making sure that roles are clear and the student understands their role. Giving them immediate and constructive feedback is really helpful. Students like to hear what they're doing well, because that helps build their confidence. And then they also need, when it needs correction, please don't wait for that and let them know right away. It's rare, but at times students don't really know where they are with stuff until the very end. And then, then there's no opportunity for corrective action planning. So, kind of like, what are the unspoken rules or norms of the organization? Provide, we talked about feedback, positive feedback. So really just, creating a space where you can have brave conversations and safe conversations with students is obviously fundamental. And then they move into this like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be phase. And some may feel really disappointed, or they're like, I'm not doing anything. Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing orientation, I'm reading policy and procedure, but I'm not doing, well, what would you like to be doing? I want to have my own caseload. I want to present in front of the board or testify in court, whatever it might be. So sometimes it takes time, and they feel like, I'm going to be in here for all this time from September through April, and really they're only going to be in your agency for 60 days altogether, right? 2 days a week for 15 weeks, that's 30 days, and then times 2, 60 days. It's not a long time. So just kind of like, there's this patience with the process and them getting to know things. So that's kind of like explaining the difference between the expectation and the reality. So students can also feel like they're challenged by the way that things run there. So in responding to those things, if you meet with them consistently for supervision, try to have that time be protected as much as you possibly can. So you're really attending to each other makes a big difference. Listening to them and helping understanding their perspective, challenging them to grow. And then ethics is a big part of our profession. And so it's one of our competencies. So that could be another way. Through supervision, you could ask them to look at this from an ethical decision-making process and see what the student would have to say about that. Then there's a kind of confrontation phase, which would be opportunities for them to grow more personally and professionally, understanding this mismatch between the reality and what they are hoping for or their perception. So readdressing the goals and expectations. So these are some of the same suggestions just for previously that we just talked about, and helping support the student as they address the concerns, whether that be with their liaison or with somebody within the organization. Modeling this behavior in how you would handle it. You could do a role play with the student to help them with this. Form the liaison of any concerning behavior that, or certainly any unacceptable or inappropriate behavior that you exhibit, the student exhibits. And then students will begin to develop some competence and confidence in their skill, knowledge, and self-reflection. So they'll see themselves as less as a student and be able to function more independently, depending on the student's background. If they have zero human service experience, or they have, they're coming in with a lot, they're still learning your organization, and that's new. So then they end up developing confidence and comfort in making decisions. So your role would be helping them to acknowledge growth and develop their confidence, shifting to treating them more as a professional and a colleague, and then allowing them to make decisions while they're while also guiding them and support as needed. You know, typical supervision approach. And then at the end, it's they're wrapping it up. So termination and transition begins with projects, with clients, with whatever it is that they may be working on with you. And then they're beginning to think about what's next. Very common at the end of the spring semester, when the student is wrapping up, that they have fear and anxiety because they start knowing what they don't know. And then they got to get out there, and then what's really going to be happening for them. And then there's sadness for them also about leaving. So the transition is really important, and helping them with that. There's helping students to understand the implications and their role in that. A lot of times you're going to be asked to help them with networking, writing referrals. The job search right now, the market is very open. There are a lot of positions that students can consider, and that might be overwhelming to them as well. Reviewing the learning agreement and evaluating your progress together like you would in any transition, and then saying goodbye. Okay, just going to pause and see if there's any other kind of questions or comments.
Julie, there's nothing in the chat, but folks might want to unmute themselves to ask some questions.
Okay, we'll move on. This is the real exciting part, I think. It's like helping them view themselves as a social worker. And so that means these 9 competencies that we're going to be talking about are these are the lenses through which we view our professional work, and it guides our intervention, and our values and so on. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but really what I'd like for you to think about is, so if a student comes in and they're concerned about something that they heard, a negative comment that was made about a client by another person in the agency, and they think that this person is just totally unethical, to have the student kind of sit down and think through, is this an ethical issue? If it is, what kind of issue is it? What are the policies in the agencies around this kind of behavior, if there are any? What would be, who do you engage with first about this? Well, they're talking to you, and then how would they approach this person? What would be, so they're being thoughtful. and then also reflective. How do they feel about what they just experienced? And kind of help them unpack that a little bit. And then how are they going to engage? Is this person a social worker? Is this person have a different role in the organization? So, depending on who that person is and their background, to take those things into consideration. They're just sort of like thinking from a theoretical perspective of how they're going to engage. This is the kind of thing, so that we're having students slow down and really think about the different impact of the impact of the different competencies and areas through which we practice and view things. This is just a kind of a higher order of thinking model. And you can use this, so students are going to start out in purple. They're going to be defining, describing, naming. They're just kind of getting the foundational content of your organization and the terms that may be used there. And then move up to demonstrating some understanding of these facts and being able to apply them. So as the student moves through their experience with you, they're starting out in those bottom maybe 3 areas, and then they'll be able to move up as they become more competent and knowledgeable to evaluation and synthesis. So these terms might be helpful for the student to use, or for you to use when you're developing the learning agreement, to use these these verbs as a part of their activities. So students, the kind of areas of learning are knowledge and values, skills, and then the self-reflection, and they call it cognitive affective, but it's really critical thinking and self-reflection. So these are just in terms of knowledge, these areas you would certainly, what we want students to understand and be thinking about, whose populations at risk, what are the social and economic injustice issues. The human behavior and social environment refers to theory. So they might ask you, and should be thinking about their theoretical approach or your organization's theoretical approach. Unless you've been teaching theory, you may not even be thinking like, what's my theory? Oh, I'm being humanistic right now. Well, no, you don't think that, you just do it. You just have positive regard for other people, and you're kind and compassionate toward them. So students might challenge you in that regard when they ask you what's your theoretical approach, and others it might be very, very clear to you, outside of like the intervention kind of models if you're working with people. Then these are our 6 social work values that students must abide by. And then these are the skills that, in terms of interpersonal skills, that we would want students to be able to demonstrate throughout their time. So some questions that, in terms of integrating the content in field, you can ask, have the students ask about the purpose of the work, or again, like as a part of supervision, you might want to ask them what values did they use, or be thinking about this for the week. Where are you integrating social work values in your internship? Identify 2 times when you've done that in this week. And then we'll talk about it in supervision, or email it to me, or however you want them to communicate that. And how are these elements used, and why are they necessary for effective practice? Here we also then have a link to our field instructor resource page, where you'll find the supervision agenda and template. So when we talk about challenges in the field placement, we all have them, and some of them are just so basic. I mean, hopefully your student didn't wear flip-flops when they did their interview with you for their pre-placement interview. But just having, really clear expectations around dress and grooming. And it can go, I was talking with a student the other day, and she felt like dressing down was somehow meant that if she dressed up, that she was going to be viewed as a rich girl or kind of snobby, and that wasn't the case. And it was just a really interesting perception that I hadn't come across. But so making sure the students are clear about how to dress and under what circumstances what they should be wearing, that they should be on time and stay during the workday. Some organizations, it's not an 8-hour day. It's like you leave when I leave. I'm here. It's not uncommon in medical settings that you might be scheduled from 8 till 5, but then you have a crisis and you end up staying till 7. So just making sure you're clear about expectations around that. If a student misses more than a week of time, we definitely need to know that so that we can make sure that there's a plan for making up time. Students obviously need to show a positive behavior and attitude. Be also clear about the cell phone use. That's a thing. Sometimes students will, like one student had their cell phone in a group, and we're working with people with paranoid delusional thinking. And so to have their cell phone in or take a selfie of herself and send it on, just like they're not thinking about things like that. So make sure that it's clear about whether they can have their phone with them or not. Embodying these 6 values as a profession, helping them learn how to manage time. That certainly is an important piece of it, and adhering to the code of ethics. So past personal experiences, we all have them and can get triggered or bring that into a situation. So they need to understand that and that have that self-reflection. Students, family issues, other commitments, just balancing all of this and what's going on right now, particularly with the challenges of vaccination, not vaccination, pandemic, how that's impacting your agency and expectations around things like that. Sometimes students are learning about professional etiquette and expectations around that, how they introduce themselves, how they refer to clients, how they address you, being able to manage their time with all of these things that they have going on. The quality of the work, but also the process of doing the work and the time that it takes for them to do it well. So not just about output and outcomes, because we're all outcome and output driven, but also like I'm learning that through an anti-racist lens, we also need to allow for the process and have the process be of quality and not just, like the quantity. Workplace behavior, they have to align with the social work values of promoting dignity and worth of the person. And then their skills. Sometimes it's going to take them a little bit, before they develop it, the competence. Okay, so what challenges in style, and we have this on our professional development page about learning styles and understanding your student style. We usually teach the way we learn best. So if you're a visual person or auditory, and your student is the opposite, or their strength is like they really need to see what this looks like on a graph, I wouldn't be their best field supervisor because I'm an auditory learner. So looking at things doesn't help me necessarily. So understanding their style and for them to have some understanding about that would really, really very helpful. We talked about students needing to be prepared for supervision and clear kind of like about what they want to talk about. They need to demonstrate competence over or that they're attending to the competencies and behaviors throughout the semester, not just do it one time. So establishing rapport and professional relationships with folks is necessary to help manage these relationship challenges. Okay, and also, with assignments. Okay, we're more than halfway through, so hang in there. So we talked about providing immediate feedback and being clear and concise about that, and informing them of what behavior needs to change, what you're looking for. We have a clear time frame around that, and then follow up with that. If documentation is needed, that's a way that you could use your documentation as a supervision tool with the student. And then looking at the learning agreement, which we're coming to soon, around opportunities in areas for growth, like what competencies do they really need to address. It's really important for you to notify the liaison and field coordinator immediately if there's recurring issues, if there's a violation of the code, other kinds of unprofessional and unacceptable behavior, any form of harassment, either the student is harassing or the student is being harassed, any form of discrimination or illegal behavior like a HIPAA violation. Now for the paperwork. Process recording. One's required every semester of all students. They can process record anything. They can process record their observations in a collaboration meeting or community meeting. They could, it doesn't have to necessarily be a one-on-one exchange. Oftentimes it is. So a student might process record a challenge around having somebody open up, or following their a client's not following the treatment plan, or they're working with somebody that is kind of intimidating to them and they're learning how to engage differently. That could be, really anybody. So this helps us establish learning needs and knowledge gaps within the student, and looking at how they can go about making these decisions, how they're working with folks. And so it can just be really, really helpful for them to use this. So they only have to do one. The form is in Sonia. You provide feedback on this, and then the liaison also reviews it. So this is what we call the LET. It's the Learning and Evaluation Tool. And this is the form that is in Sonia that has two parts. The student initiates at the beginning of the semester. You're responsible to help them complete that by the end of the semester. And the activities that you're going to be defining, it's like a treatment plan, or any kind of an action plan where there's like a goal, an objective, and then what are the action steps going to be that you're going to do with this. So we want the activities to be SMART in these areas, and in terms of time bound, it doesn't have to be a specific date. It just needs to be done. It's assumed that it's going to be done within the semester. So here is an example of competency 4 in the LET, which is engaging in practice-informed research and research-informed practice, which is basically what does the evidence say that this is a good approach, and what is the process that informs that research. So for example, in the first behavior, it's about using theory and scientific inquiry to guide practice with individuals, groups, and so on to make decisions. So really what the activity would be, it might be something like identify 2 theoretical models that support for working with juvenile delinquents or people in the juvenile justice system, something like that. So then, so these are here, this is where the SMART activity is, and it's something that needs to be done throughout the semester. So it wouldn't be just a one-time thing where it's like a checkbox and I'm done. On this also, it shows, this is the evaluation portion of it, which we'll look at moving forward. And then you don't have to worry about the dimensions part of it. This is just what this behavior includes knowledge and skill and this cognitive affective, which is the reflective self-reflection piece. CSWE's recommended that we have that in our learning in this tool. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Okay, so each of these 9 competencies, they have these, as I said, we have these behaviors that address the competency, and then we have these, well, these slides are just pretty much kind of like the same thing. So those are the behaviors. Here's where you write in the learning activity with the student with the little pencil here. And the dot next to it means that it's a required field. And at the bottom of the learning agreement in Sonia, there will be this places where you can save it as a draft. The student agreement to submit button, and then you'll click, have you reviewed this? Do you accept it? If you're requiring modifications, and then any other comments that you may have regarding this. The liaison then also does the same thing. And if there's some, sometimes there's a need to reopen the agreement or clear signatures, and just, you can be in touch with Paris about that, or your field coordinator can probably help you with that too. Don't ask me, because I don't know. And then you do the evaluation piece of it. So at the end of the semester, so does the student demonstrate, did this any research evidence to guide their practice and treatment decisions with clients? This is a clinical, obviously a clinical LET form. So the bachelor's and first placement masters have different behaviors as from the specialized students at the macro and clinical level. So this is clearly the clinical example of competency 4. So when you get to the end of the semester, did they use research to guide practice in their decision making? So we have it right here. No, they didn't do that. I asked them to do that. They continue to not do that. So they need improvement. Or yep, they meet the standard. They did that. They said they did the things they said they were going to do in the learning activity, or they consistently and constantly use it. So that guides the level. So the student knows right at the beginning, and you know how they're going to be evaluated for these particular behaviors and learning activities. So what an outstanding rating means is that they are consistently and constantly doing something. They've demonstrated it several times throughout the semester. That's probably not going to be what students are doing in the fall semester. They will probably either need improvement or meet standards, unless they really are coming in with some good skill and background. Anybody on the field team, is there something I'm missing?
Well, we do have a question, Julie, if you can expand a little bit more just with regard to the SMART activity. So the question is, can you explain the nuances of creating a SMART goal that is done throughout the semester, not a one-time activity. Allison was saying that she finds this challenging because activities done 1 or 2 times are often used as SMART goals.
Well, right. So good question. My view of this is that for me, if a student demonstrates something on a monthly basis, that's pretty good. If they're, I mean, certainly more depends on what it is. I'm open to field coordinators jumping in and offering your part of it. So it could be apply an ethical decision-making model 4 times. Monthly use supervision, bring in talk about a policy that is anti-racist or impact of something. So I think you can make it be SMART and still kind of have a number attached to it, but just so that they're demonstrating it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that briefly. I think a good way to guide that is if you look at the outcomes as it relates to the evaluation portion, if at the end of the semester, you were to rate the student as meets standards for that particular behavior, how many times would you need to see them engage or demonstrate the activity? So for some things, it may be that 1 or 2 times would be sufficient. And for other things, let's say it's going to be an intake is the activity attached to one of the behaviors. It may be that you would want for them to conduct 6 intakes before you would be able to evaluate them as meeting standards. Or maybe the student, it's second semester, and the student would like to really focus in on their assessment skills. And if you think about what outstanding looks like in comparison to what meeting standards would look like for a behavior or an activity such as doing intake assessments, how many times or with what types of new clientele, for example, what would that look like? So you can add that level of specificity into the way that the activity is framed.
Thanks, Lisa. We also have some sample learning agreement activities for the curriculum that that's available as a resource. I don't recall if it's on the web. I'm pretty sure it's on the website, but we'll have, if not, we definitely have that to help. And then on the evaluation, at the end of the semester, you're rating the students' skill, so that you consider what they did up above in those ratings at the behavior level, and then you at the bottom underneath each competency, you rate the student's overall skill for this competency. And then there might be some additional accomplishments that the student demonstrated that aren't associated with the things that they had done as a part of their learning agreement portion, that you might say that they did, that they like attended a conference and brought back some really great information and made some recommendations for different types of interventions or something, for example. Okay, so evaluation and grading, it's dependent on the learning agreement, participation in integrative field seminars as well, and input from the field instructor and liaison. Our system is a pass, no grade system. And so you would recommend the grade. And then the field instructor, so you recommend the grade to the liaison, who submits and recommends the grade to the coordinator. And the ultimate grade decision is mine for the master students and Nikki's for the bachelors, but I'll talk to each other about it. So here's an example, and I'm going to move through these kind of quickly, but we have this for all 9 slides if you want to pull this presentation up and look at it. So what does demonstrating ethical and professional behavior look like in practice? So they would review the code of ethics and apply it to a case scenario. So they will demonstrate that they follow the agency's policies and procedures, and they can talk to you about that in supervision and so on. So these are the things that, and we'll have this PowerPoint at the presentation part with what we're recording today, and then just the presentation itself. So if you want to look at this again, I mean, just the PowerPoint itself, so you can look at it. So we have this for each one of these: engaging in diversity and difference. How does that look in practice? Advancing human rights and social justice. How does that look? We talked about this one a little bit. Policy practice, reviewing them at all levels, understanding the policies that guide and drive your practice. The next competencies are engagement. So again, individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. This is what the bachelor students will be addressing, and the first placement generalist master's students. The OCL students, it'll say engage with organizations and communities, and the clinical students, it'll say engage with individuals, families, and groups. Otherwise, it's, you're the same. So engagement, assessment, intervention is competency 8, and then competency 9 is evaluating practice. So check in with our Sonia system, and this is where you can find that. Oh, I came out of a meeting today, just before this, and I found out that field education has 50% of the hits on our website are by field educators getting into our Sonia system. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so this is our contact information. So if you have any Sonia needs, if you look at Paris down at the bottom, that's her phone, and a lot of us are back in the office again. So feel free, or I mean, email might be the first best start, but certainly you can also call and be in touch with us. So thank you so much. You are, students, field education is the part of social work education that is considered the signature pedagogy. It's the way that students really learn about the profession through including all of their the important coursework that they learn. So I'm sorry that was very fast, but Lisa, you want to talk about something? Go ahead.
I just, in this last couple of minutes, I did put our field education website in the chat. There's this agency field instructor resources. I won't click on it because it will take a while to refresh, but this might be of interest. And then our field education manual is here, and Julie had referenced the professional development modules, so they might be of interest. And then just with regard to Sonia, we do have a calendar in Sonia. It has all of the field education due dates listed in it, so that's always available. There is an option if you are interested in importing it to one of your calendars. That's a tool that's available if you want to import it into, I think the options are maybe Outlook and Google. But this is what your page should look like. And the last thing I want just to quickly note is on the Forms tab, instruments such as the supervision agenda, those are optional, but you and the students have access to self-selecting some of those tools or forms. So feel free to take advantage of that feature in Sonia.